but I was, really being ruled by the shame that I had for just not being this like perfect undergraduate student. Oh, if I have the courage to embrace this feeling and push through it, then I can turn this into a benefit. I think is one of the biggest lessons that I've learned from Buddhism. And I'm like crying and she's crying. And I was like, it happened. I did it. Oh my gosh.
From SGI USA, I'm Cassidy Bradford, and this is Buddhability, the weekly series where I talk with Buddhists from all walks of life about the power we each have to change our lives and the world around us. Thank you, Jackie, for joining the podcast. It's great to have you here. And for anybody that knows us, knows that we know each other from living in Chicago together. So, we've known each other for, I don't know, like maybe 5-6 years. When we talked last week, I realized like, oh, you can know somebody and know bits and pieces of their lives, but we don't always get sort of like a chronological, like, here's my story. So I'm just, really looking forward to hearing it and getting to share it. So to kind of kick things off, I'm just going to have you introduce yourself however you'd like to do that. And you can just take it away.
Thank you so much. Yes, so my name is Jackie Alexander. I'm from Chicago, best city ever. I work in like health science research, like public health, is my passion. I really like being able to like transform health outcomes and really look at health disparities as well as like health education or like some of the things that I'm really passionate about in my day-to-day life. And then I've been practicing Buddhism for 7 years.
Wow. Okay, so then we've known each other probably like 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
I'd love to know just kind of a little bit about like your childhood and your life growing up before you started practicing, and like what kind of led to the moment that you were like introduced to Buddhism and decided you were going to try chanting.
Yes. So I grew up mostly on the south side of Chicago. I am the oldest of 3 siblings. I originally grew up in my family's like church on my father's side, but my mom left the church when I was a kid. So for a while she kind of like maintained some of the same beliefs and practices, but then over time I was kind of just not really in an environment based in spirituality, and kind of just was like really curious about different things like on my own, just kind of naturally inquisitive about different things. And then after I started college, my sophomore year of college, one of my really good friends from high school became friends in high school. We ended up both going to the same college. He practiced Buddhism, and my parents, we ended up losing our housing. So I was a commuter student. I still lived with my family, and my younger 2 siblings, I wanted my parents like attention and like resources to go primarily to them. So I was a full-time student and I was working like 2 part-time jobs. So I just told my parents, I was like, I'll do something. I'll figure something out. I don't know. But I want, your attention to go to them. So one of the like friends that like really showed up for me at that time was, this friend from high school, and we went to the same college. And I was like afraid to really ask him for a lot of support, but he was the one that was like, you can do whatever you want, dude. Like whatever you need, like I will help you out. I will support. And then, of course, because of his practice, he would chant. And so I remember the first time I heard him chant, it was like, early in the morning. And so I kind of woke up and then I was like, I don't know what the heck he's doing. He was a theater arts major. So I was like, maybe he's doing like a monologue.
Some exercise. Yeah.
I was like, vocal warm-ups or something. I don't know. And I just like went back to sleep. And then, and just having like dialogue with him, and he was sharing about like what he was doing, about the chanting and everything. He encouraged me to, of course that you can chant for anything, but he encouraged me to really just kind of isolate and focus in on one thing. So I decided to focus on my mom getting a new job, because her work was just like part-time work. So I was not sure what I was doing. I remember like not being like feeling like confident that I was like saying the words correctly, like, all those different things. So I was like really kind of like, okay, what is going on, and trying to find like a rhythm and like a groove to really get
the
into
actual
it.
Like mechanics of chanting.
Yeah. So once I kind of like figured out some of the mechanics and was able to smooth into things, then I felt more comfortable with like, okay, I can just like focus on like this one thing. Because, it's very easy to just feel like overwhelmed with thoughts and different things
Yeah.
and emotions and feelings. But I'm really appreciative that it's like, okay, let's just focus on one thing. And then my mom was, she found a job pretty quickly. And that was the
Wow.
same type of work, but it was full time.
Yeah. Did you, like, when that happened, did you think immediately, like, oh, it's this Buddhist chanting that has, produced this result? Or were you, like, still kind of unsure? Like, what was the response for you?
Yeah, I was kind of like, whoa, that was fast. Because I
Yeah.
think at the time that we like were losing our housing and stuff, my mom didn't really have any leads on a job to my
Wow.
knowledge. So it was really like,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, like, okay, like maybe there's something to it. Like I wasn't fully like, yes, it was absolutely because I chanted, but I definitely felt that maybe this happened a little quicker than it would have if
Hmm.
I hadn't chanted. That, I definitely had a
Mm.
sense that chanting helped, to some degree. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, that was my first like kind of experience with chanting.
Wow. It's really interesting. Like, I have to say, I'm very impressed that, someone tells you, okay, you can chant for anything you want in your life. You could chant for, a car, you could chant for housing for yourself or whatever. But the one thing that you wanted to chant about was a job for your mom rather than something about yourself. You strike me as somebody that's really like bright and like go getter and okay, I'm gonna make it happen. But I mean, I imagine losing your housing, like that's got to be really scary and traumatizing. And you're also working and a student, and now for however long you're like bouncing couch to couch. Like, what was that time like for you, like emotionally?
Yeah, it was really intense because like at the time I was like pre-nutrition. I thought I was going to go to school to be a registered dietitian, and you have to take classes for 2 years and then
Mm-hmm.
apply to be accepted into the nutrition program. So I was taking like a lot of like chemistry and like bio and yeah, like that sort of thing. And then yeah, so it was like really really tough classes, like the classes that they call like the weed out classes. So I was
Mm.
in those classes and then just like also navigating like taking care of like my family and my siblings. So it's like when we got to the point, because it was like it was a idea, it was a concept, it was a fear of like, oh, we might lose our housing. And so when it happened, actually, like when I got the text message from my dad that we were evicted, I was actually on my way to take a chemistry exam, which was like my worst subject. Like I looking
Oh,
back, I should not have taken that exam. I think I got like a 13% or something. I was like already like not doing well.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I should not have taken it. I don't know why I still took it. Um, but yeah, it was just one of those things where I was like really, like, oh, I don't know if like college is for me. I don't know what it is that I need to do. Like it was just really intense, a lot of different emotions. And then like some of my friends like didn't really have the capacity to, really understand what it was that I was going through. Like they couldn't really relate. So that was
Mm.
also challenging too sometimes because they like I could see them like trying or like wanting to do or like support, but them just not really understanding what they needed to do as well. So it was just a time of like a lot of uncertainty, really like intense emotions, especially because like after we lost our housing, like my dad's car got repossessed too, like just like other obstacles
Wow.
like came about as well.
And so this is like everything kind of like, yeah, the context of your life when you first tried chanting, your mom then found the full-time job. It was in the like fall time, right? That like you had like lost housing. And so then what was the spring like?
Yes. So in the spring, my parents did acquire housing. They were able to get an apartment through an organization that like paid for their like first month's rent. So, like yeah, like a really big benefit. They were
Wow.
able to get support where yeah, where they ended up living. They didn't have to kind of pay those initial things, and then
Mm-hmm.
like at the like towards the end of the fall semester, I had opened up to my advisor about what it was that I was going through, and she really just like affirmed like, oh, no wonder you're like not doing well in your classes, like this is a really challenging thing that you're doing. So in that conversation, I decided that I wanted nutrition to be my minor, and I declared kinesiology, doing the exercise science and like health promotion path as my major, and just having dialogue with her, I realized like, oh, I actually do really enjoy exercise. So in the spring was like the first time I really felt like I belonged in college, because I was taking classes like the intro to exercise science class. I loved that class. That was like my first time like really like getting like an A in like a major subject. And so I really felt like, okay, this is like, I do belong in college. Like I do, you know, need to be here.
It must have felt really incredible, especially like after the semester before, feeling like, oh my gosh, like going into that chemistry exam and like, really struggling so much. At what point, like as you were like starting to chant and learning more about Buddhism, did you feel like, oh, okay, I think like I really want to commit to like being practicing Buddhism?
Yeah, so I want to say the end of that spring semester was the first time I visited like my local like Buddhist community, like Buddhist center, and I attended like an intro to Buddhism meeting. It just so happened that the day that I walked in, there was an intro meeting, and I just remember like the conviction that everyone had. Like, I would ask questions about like, is it possible to do this? Like, there was goals that I was really like uncertain about. And I just remember them being like, absolutely, you can achieve that. Like, there was no doubt in anything that they were saying. It was just very clear, like, if that's what you decide is the best thing for your life, then you can make it happen. It's really just up to you to decide. And so I was kind of like, like that always sticks with me. And then, yeah, from there, I was able to connect with like other people that like lived close to me as well. And then essentially, anytime that I had questions, I could just come back to a meeting and ask. So every time, I would like, get answers about certain things. And then I would like, be thinking, and I'm like, okay, well, what about this? And then I knew that, okay, if I go to another activity or another meeting, that they would answer, my question. And then, I really made like good, strong connections with like other like youth as well. They're like close to my age. So yeah, I would like, just like text them arbitrarily, like, oh, I saw this term. Like, what does it mean? Or like, what is this activity like? Or, whatever. And yeah, people were just always so supportive with, me being like inquisitive. So I definitely knew at a certain point in time that, yeah, I really love this practice. I was chanting morning and evening, but I was still kind of like grappling in my heart with like, oh, well, what will other people think? Will people think I'm weird? Like, how will my family take this? Like, oh, but then when I thought about it, I was like, I'm doing all the things. I'm studying the books. I'm chanting morning and evening. Like, I think I should just, yeah, stop being afraid. So yeah, that was 2017, July 5th.
Wow. It's interesting because I think a lot of people do feel that sort of like, oh, do I really want to like commit to this practice and living my life this way? And I think even for people like me that like grew up in this community, it wasn't like I was always kind of half in, half out until like some big problems happened in my life. And then I had a similar kind of feeling like, what am I waiting for? Like, I just keep like putting it off, but like postponing taking this kind of like responsibility for my happiness is just like prolonging this like struggling. So I know today we're going to talk a lot about like having the courage to go for things that, you feel might be impossible. So you have a kind of earlier experience, like earlier in your practice, when you were in undergrad. So I'm wondering if you can like dive in, tell me that story.
Yes, undergrad. So yeah, I officially like started my practice, and then that spring semester that I described before, I actually found out that I was on the dean's list. I was placed on the dean's list, so I went from being on like academic probation, like failing classes, like having to withdraw, to being recognized for like doing really well academically. And then I was able to also to just really foster great relationships on campus with my professor, like that intro to exercise science class. I ended up having a great relationship with that professor. Like I was an undergraduate research assistant for her. So yeah, so that was all like in July. I found out I was on the dean's list, and then when I returned to campus that fall, I saw these advertisements for a study abroad program in Barcelona, Spain. And I'm like reading these flyers, and I'm like, this sounds amazing. You know, this is what I want to do. And then like all the anxiety and the fear would like, you know, creep in. You know, like you don't have a passport, you've never left the country before, like that's too expensive, like they're not going to accept you, all these different types of thoughts. But I knew that, okay, I can take that nervousness and I can chant about it. I can chant to at least try. If it, you know, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But if I try, then I won't have regret of like, oh shoot, I should have done that. So one of the things that I did after, you know, I chanted about it and I talked about it with other people in the local like Buddhist community, you know, just to receive encouragement about it, I emailed the professor. So this program is really unique because one of the professors in the department designed it for students with my major. So I reached out to him, and he had like a reputation for being like very like strict and like no nonsense. And so a lot of students sometimes were like kind of like like really nervous to like talk with him. Yeah. So yeah, I emailed him and I set up a meeting just to like ask questions. So I met up with him in his office, and you know, he answered my logistical questions, but then he didn't, you know me. So he just created space. So like, let me just get to know you. Like, who is Jackie? And so I just told myself like, okay, I'm just going to be myself. I'm just going to be, you know, my natural self. And I just, you know, I answered his questions. And then I remember he said, okay, I really want you to apply to the Barcelona program. And he was like, and I don't think you'll have to pay for it. And I was like, I was like, this man is kind of nuts. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, there's money each year that goes unused. And he's like, I really think that you're like, you know, deserving of like not having to pay for this. Because yeah, I definitely expressed doubt. I was like, well, yeah, I don't know if I can pay for this, but I'm interested. Right. So then he said, not only do I think that you're going to do the Barcelona program, but he's like, I think you're also going to do the Costa Rica program. And I was like, he is really wild. Wow. Like that's nuts. I was like, I'm so like fortunate and lucky to be able to do one, let alone two. Like that's insane.
And you said that you didn't even have a passport at the time, right? Like you had never been out of the U.S. Okay.
Yeah, never been out of the U.S. And
now you're gonna go two different places. Okay.
Yeah. So I was like, you're crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's like precisely what happened. You know, I just chanted with what he said in my mind. He was able to help me connect with someone on campus that helped explain like the different scholarship options for study abroad. And then yeah, that winter break I just full went into like researching scholarships and applications. And one of the things that I'm so appreciative of in like this practice is I was able to kind of refer to a lot of the things that I was learning from Buddhism in my like personal essays. Like there's a quote from Josei Toda that says like too big is just big enough for a youth's dreams. Like I put that in, you know, my essay. So yeah, there was, you know, several scholarships that I applied for. And then and that following spring was when you actually like interview with like the professor and the TAs and stuff, and you have to visit the study abroad office and those kind of things. So I had some obstacles with that where I had went to the study abroad office to like formally apply, and they're like, well, you don't qualify for this program because, you know, I had been on academic probation. And I was like, well, the professor said that I could, you know, and I was like very transparent with him. I was like, look, on paper, I am not the hottest thing. But yeah, but he was able to like advocate on my behalf and tell the study abroad office like, no, I want her to apply. Like, yeah. So even though they told me like, you can't apply, like I was, you know, able to be really protected. And they're like, no, like I'm making an exception for Jackie. She can apply.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, when I like hear it now and like remember it, I'm like, how did that even happen?
There are like things like academic probation, right? Like there are so many things that like we can easily see as like an immovable like obstacle, right? Like, well, this is just like the policy, and so I guess this is it. And like, because I got on academic probation, like I just don't get to have any of these things. But Buddhism says like you can chant for really anything, whatever you want, even the things that seem impossible. So like my question is like, when the study abroad office was like, no, you can't apply, what was your like initial reaction?
Kind of disappointed, kind of shocked, because I was like, oh, I've been working, really hard towards this thing, and I had all this hope. So I think I, reached out to him afterwards. But I just remember seeing an email where he was like, no, like Jackie can apply. Like, I'm making an exception. Like, yeah. So I like did interviews, and then, I remember, just like that same kind of mentality when I met with the professor the first time of like, I'm just gonna be myself, because like I can't change like my GPA or the fact that I've been on probation or anything. So I just have to really show them my heart, and that was one of the things that I've really learned from the practice and from studying Buddhism. So and then I was formally accepted into the program, and I was so happy and excited. And then the study abroad office was like, you have to put down this deposit to keep your spot. And I was like, oh, like I don't have any money. Yeah. So I was like having like mini heart attack. And so I just was like, okay, I have to chant and I have to figure this out. So I was chanting, and then I was like, oh, I should call my grandma. So I called my grandma. And I was like, Grandma, I got into the program, but I have to put down this deposit. It's this much money. And she was like, oh, yeah, you have that. I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, no, I don't. She was like, yeah, there's a bank account with more than that with your name on it. And I was like, huh? So my great grandmother, who I like grew up with as a young child, before she passed away, she had set up bank accounts for me and my siblings to use for college. And so what I didn't know at the time was like my grandma was giving me like, like with each semester, she'll give me a bit of money from that account. But I didn't know that. So she was like, yeah, we can just, set up a time to withdraw the money, but you have it. So it's like, and I literally like I had no clue. I didn't think to reach out to her until I sat down and really chanted about it.
For people listening that maybe haven't tried chanting before, there's this aspect of like when you're chanting about something, very naturally like wisdom comes out of your life, and so something like this that can seem kind of like mystic, that like, oh, you just thought, oh, who I should talk to, my grandma, but that happens to me all the time. Like I'll think something is like a total like roadblock that I cannot pass, but I decide, okay, I'm just going to chant about it because I really want to be able to like make whatever this thing is happen. And then I'll like, it's like my mind opens up almost. Like all of these ideas that I was totally like blocking before.
Yeah, definitely. Especially because I'm thinking, oh man, I might have to ask my grandma for the money, but she's telling me that I have it. And I'm like,
yeah,
what do you mean I have it? Wow. I was like, I don't have it. I'm like,
I will show you my bank account right now, like, Grandma. There's nothing there.
Yeah, because there was like a pretty tight deadline too. Like I had like, wow, a week or two, maybe something like that. So I was like really like,
wow. Well, and I mean, like, had you not reached out to her and told her, like, you might not have known and then didn't get to, put down the deposit. Yeah, I feel like when we chant every day, like our lives just really become in rhythm. And when big things like pop up and we don't really know how to move forward, but we just chant, then we can still like, take the right steps that we need to. So then you do the deposit. And then did you have to pay for the rest of the program?
I didn't have to pay anything at all. So I had been getting a lot of rejections from scholarships and even like smaller ones just to cover like, getting my passport. And then I had a meeting for everyone that was going to go on study abroad. And they were announcing, like, if you apply to this scholarship, they've announced the winners. If you apply to this scholarship, they've announced the winners. So it's just like, like, you know, as they like say like each one. And then there was one scholarship that I was still waiting to hear back from. They're like, if you apply to that one and you haven't heard back, don't worry. They're always the last ones to announce like who the winners are. And I was like, I have to go chant. So yeah, I remember like reaching out to someone and being like, hi, I'm really nervous about getting a scholarship study abroad. Can we meet up and chant together, please? And so yeah, just really like just trying to be so just like laser focused. They're like, I have to get this scholarship. I have to go. I have to get this scholarship. I have to go to this program. And so yeah, I ended up getting exactly the amount of money that I needed. That scholarship gave me like literally like to the dollar amount, the exact amount of money that I needed to cover the program. And then, you know, someone volunteered to pay for my passport. One of my mom's friends that I had told, like, yeah, I'm really challenging this thing. And they, you know, they asked me, they're like, do you have a passport? I was like, no. They're like, okay, I'll pay for it. And I was like, what?
What?
I was like, what do you mean? So yeah, sure? They just, and then they like straight away was like, oh, how much is it? Like, sent me the money.
Wow.
Yeah. And then that like bank account that I had from my great grandmother, I was able to use that to buy my flight because that program didn't cover a flight. And then, you know, I was able to find a really good flight, and I paid like the least amount of money out of like all of my peers. And then, yeah. And then even getting there, like I had a student apartment. I had like the best apartment. Yeah, there's a basilica in Barcelona, Spain, that's like a big part of their culture, La Sagrada Familia. I was living directly across the street from, yeah. Yeah, so literally like I had a balcony, and then it's like,
oh my God.
Yeah, so sometimes like when my classmates would like come to art, they're like, wait a minute, how did you get, my apartment's not like this.
You were like, listen, I chant Nam-myoho-renge-kyo, so I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And I know that, I mean, one, I just want to know, like, how was the program, like, getting both of those opportunities? And then kind of like as a add-on to that, I know that at some point in one of the programs, you got a lot of clarity about what you wanted to study kind of after.
Yeah, so the Barcelona program was amazing. It was really unique in the fact that we did a lot of like excursions. Like we weren't in a physical classroom a lot. We were like going to different places and like meeting like different experts on different things. One of the things that we studied was how the city structure contributes to the health outcomes. And so as I was talking with my professor about how, all these different things really influence like their health outcomes, he was like, I think you might be interested in public health. It seems like public health is a really big interest of yours. So I always kept that in mind. That, you know, public health was something that, you know, I was able to tie into the different things that I was studying. So I really was able to become like so much more of a stronger person with studying abroad, like, you know, living in another country, like, you know, pretty much on your own for an extended amount of time really does bring out a specific type of like courage, especially too, because I took high school Spanish like for 4 years, but I didn't realize like how good of a Spanish program that I had. So I was able to like really communicate with people as well, and like help like some of my roommates that didn't know any Spanish. Like I felt just so much more stronger as an individual and like so much more capable now as an individual as well. And then I was able to share like my Buddhist practice with like my classmates and stuff as well. And like meet people who practice Buddhism and that live in Barcelona. So it was really great to see like how there was just such a warm, like, you know, same in Chicago and in the US, there was just such a warm, you know, super diverse community, even in Barcelona, Spain. So yeah, that I felt really empowered and really confident, you know, when I came back to the US and came back to class.
If you had not been like practicing Buddhism around like people in your Buddhist community, do you think that you would have still like had the courage to apply for the study abroad?
Absolutely not. I was terrified.
I was wondering if you'd be like, hell, I don't know.
No,
Absolutely not.
I was mortified. Like, I remember, like, you know, sitting in like one of the like study areas and just like staring at that poster and just like kind of going through the like, that's impossible or that is like, but if I wasn't like, if I didn't have like concepts from Buddhism to like really reinforce that, some of my classmates would talk about like, oh man, I wish I would have done that. And, you know, I was like, oh, like, you know, did you apply? And they're like, man, well, I can't really do that. Like, I would have been the same boat, I feel like. So yeah, I think I would have just been like regretful.
It's interesting, like there's, like you said, when you like first started chanting, being really impressed in like the people you met, like in their conviction that like you can make anything possible in your life, and having that like kind of encouragement and reassurance, I think is really powerful. And then when you chant, you start to actually believe too, you know, even if at first you might not, but people encourage you and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to chant. And wait a second, actually, I am starting to gain some confidence. Like maybe this can work. Maybe I can make it happen. Just when the first couple of years of your practice, like during college, were there any things in particular like that you studied or learned about Buddhism that you were really like struck by and you studied a lot, or really like informed kind of how you went about your life in college?
Yes. So there's a book called You Were Born to Win.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I got this book before, you know, I decided to really practice Buddhism for myself. And yeah, I was just eating this book up. It's so encouraging. It is so encouraging. And, you know, just a passage from that book, it says that youth is a painful time. It is full of problems, but dealing with such troubles helps us grow as human beings. When we look back at the times we really suffered, the times we thought were the most miserable, we see that these were the most precious times of all. That's why we need to grapple with our problems head on instead of trying to escape them. That's the most direct way forward. If you're sad and lonely, then you should acknowledge those feelings. Don't try to distract yourself from them with shallow amusements. Don't diminish them. Go through these feelings, bravely weather them, and turn them into nourishment for your growth. So it's like reading things like that, especially at the time that I came across this day, really just like first normalize like my feelings as a young person. Like I feel like so many young people, especially in today's time, like do grapple with just feeling really overwhelmed by problems and by emotions and that sort of thing. So it's like not only is it like kind of like you know, validating like how like I felt at the time, but it's also encouraging me that I can just push through it and I'll actually grow appreciation for my problems when I look back, which at the time when you're suffering, you're like, no way. Like, I don't want to appreciate this. I want it to go away. I want to avoid it. Right. It's, you know, at least for me, that's how, you know, I often feel in the midst of an obstacle. But yeah, just really like, okay, like, oh, if I have the courage to embrace this feeling and push through it, then I can turn this into a benefit. I think is one of the biggest lessons that I've learned from Buddhism.
Yeah, absolutely. I like, especially in my early 20s when I was in undergrad, like, yeah, I just had so many like really big, overwhelming feelings. Sometimes anger, sometimes like sadness, whatever. But I like what you said about like embracing them rather than running away, because I think like when I like chanting allows me to do that. Like chanting about it and facing it is like, okay, I'm embracing this as like part of my, I don't know, who I am in my journey. I don't know. Did you have like times where you were chanting that you were like felt totally hopeless, or were like those moments of like facing the suffering when you're chanting? Like what did that feel like?
Yeah, so you know, there's times where like you could be so overwhelmed with negative emotions, that's the only thing you can really think to do. Like, I just need to chant, because it's like I don't know if I can make wise decisions otherwise if I don't go chant. And then even sometimes when you do sit down to try and chant, you know, you may just be crying and like you're not chanting anything, or you're just so overwhelmed with emotions that you're not like pronouncing anything clearly, or like, you know, there's all types of, or your blood could be like boiling and you're just like chanting so angrily or like so fast, like all the different things are like, you know, really possible. But like chanting really helps me feel grounded in the midst of like suffering, really deeply, to try to like come back to center and like really, really look at myself, really look at my life, really look at the situation. Like, okay, like what is it that I can do about it? I feel like chanting also helps me accept the things that I can't control. Like it helps me see like, okay, I can't do anything about that though, but what are the things that I can do? And really like chanting for that clarity as well. Because I think when I first was learning about chanting, I was only thinking that I could chant for tangible things. And then I remember someone I think I might have asked someone, or they might have shared with me that like, yeah, of course you can chant to receive clarity too. It's not so much like, I want a car, give me a car. Like you can chant about like truly anything. But I was thinking anything in terms of like physical
material
things.
Yeah,
but yeah, they're like, no, any feeling that you have, you can chant about it. Like of course you could chant for clarity. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, like let me yeah, I was like kind of like really like awoken me in a sense, like, okay, let me try that, to chant for clarity as well, or just like ask questions while I'm chanting, like, well, what is this about?
Yeah, definitely, like for a long time, and like especially my mid-20s, I chanted a lot about like, how do I just even want to live my life? Like, what is the purpose? How can I make the most meaning out of my life? But there are other periods of my life where I'm like, okay, I want this job with this pay and these benefits and this and this, but I think that's the like amazing thing about chanting is like, yeah, we can do all of those things. We can chant about all of those things. So after you finish college, you're like, you went on these amazing study abroad programs, you're developing your like Buddhist practice, just kind of strengthening your own life. What happened when you graduated?
Yeah, so I feel like I was able to graduate like with a bang, in a sense. Like I was able to, complete the minor requirements. That was like a bit of an obstacle in undergrad. There was a staff member that had nominated me to be recognized at graduation, because she like supported me through like the different obstacles I was having. I mean, I wasn't recognized, but just the fact that she told me she nominated me was just so like, so, and then I learned too that like, oh, you can say like that you were nominated for something. Like you still put on your resume, for example, that you're nominated, even though you didn't obtain said award. So yeah, I was able to really graduate with a bang. And then I started my first job like a month later. I was working in a fitness facility, and then like 60 days later was the lockdown. Yeah.
God. Wow. Okay, so then did you immediately feel like freaked out and discouraged? Like working at a facility, I'm assuming like you could only do your work in person, right?
Yeah. So
okay.
I ended up being furloughed.
Okay.
But yeah, it was a very confusing time. So, there's a lot of like uncertainty, and because at first they said like, oh, like no one can work for 2 weeks, but then you can come back. And then it's like, oh, it's looking like a month, that type of thing. So there's a lot of uncertainty of like, well, do I have a job? Do I not have a job? Can I come back to work? All these different things. But like the benefit of like literally being at home with nothing to do is that you really get the space and time, because there's a lot of time, a lot of space, to like really look at your life and what your desires are and what it is that you want to do. So, I'm just at home chanting, and, public health came up again. And I had like researched some schools for graduate school before I graduated with undergrad. I knew it was something that I wanted to do, but I didn't really have the courage at the time to do it. And like some people had been asking me like, so you're going to go back to school, right? And I was like, no, I'm just going to work, I think, for a year and then consider. But I knew in my heart like that I wanted to study public health, but I was, really being ruled by the shame that I had for just not being this like perfect undergraduate student. Really thinking like, well, who would accept me with like my type of transcript and, that sort of thing. And I remember the same professor that I studied abroad with, we were talking about like, my future and stuff. And I was like, well, I can't go to grad school. And I remember he made a face of like, I was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, oh, like I have all these things in my transcript, like my GP, all this stuff. And he was just like, no. And then because, you know, I had such a like unique experience with him, he was willing to, you know, write a letter of recommendation for me. And then he gave me guidance regarding like who to reach out to about like getting a letter of recommendation. So like really sitting and chanting with that guidance, I was able to, you know, over time like develop more courage to like actually apply to grad school, but like actually have like a map in my head of like how I can make it a reality. Like, okay, these are the people I'm going to talk to, you know, write me a letter. You know, this is the type of school that I want to go to.
So you said you were experiencing like a lot of shame. How long would you say it took you of like chanting about it to really feel like, okay, I'm going to do it? And even in that decision moment, were you like 100% all in, or was it like, okay, I'm going to do it, but I'm terrified and I don't know if I really believe in myself yet?
Yeah, so I would say like before I grew the courage, I mean, it was definitely some months. Like at one point, I was kind of like hyper focused on finding a new job because again, we didn't know that we would be in quarantine for that long.
Yeah.
So then I was like, okay, maybe I could just find another job and like this COVID thing will be over and I could just work and do that. But as it just kept prolonging, it was just like, okay, I really do have to sit and chant and confront this, you know, kind of feeling that I'm having. Because I was like, you know, it makes sense to do like an online program and then I don't have to worry about what scary diseases are out in the world. So yeah, it definitely took some months though. Like I was, I remember like I would like start my applications and then like someone would call me and they was like, yeah, there's this deadline coming up. Like, do you think you'll apply by them? And I'll be like, oh, I don't know. And then like I would say like, oh, you know, maybe like whatever like the most like upcoming deadline was, I would say, oh, maybe like the one that's like afterwards. And then they would like call me again and be like, hey, you said you were gonna do it. So yeah, it definitely became a possibility through like studying a lot, like getting a lot of encouragement from like some of the other like young women, especially in my Buddhist community, of, you know, them just like encouraging me or just like seeking like, oh, like what are your goals? Because we were all in a place of just like everyone is in such an uncertain time, so everyone was connecting and reaching out to everyone, and then just like asking like, oh, what is it that you need? Like I'll chant for it. So that also helped me like continuously redetermine of like, okay, I'm connecting with this person. They're asking me how my life is in this really uncertain time, and they want to chant for me. How about I'll share this like determination of like, okay, I want to go like back to school, and then, you know, I'll have that support, and then they check in with you, like, oh, like how's it going, like, and so that also helped me like continuously redetermine and try to find the courage to be like, okay, I'm gonna actually like try and do this.
I mean, we talk about it a lot on the show, and I mean just like in our Buddhist community that like, yeah, oftentimes you have to like determine and redetermine and redetermine and redetermine until you like actually break through. And sometimes that comes from people like encouraging you, sometimes that comes from studying some kind of, you know, Buddhist material, sometimes it comes from chanting, but it is like I asked because I wonder for anybody listening that's like, okay, like I'm trying to face this like bad feeling that I have about myself, or, you know, lack of confidence in my life. And I feel like I start doing it and then I stop, and I start doing it and I stop. And I don't know, even for myself, sometimes I'm like, man, am I ever going to break through this? I keep like, you know, this like back and forth. Did you experience that?
Yeah, definitely. Because yeah, there'd be times where I'm, you know, like I'll hear back from a job and they're like, oh, maybe I don't have to go back to school. I could just like, you know, like I have this job interview, like maybe I could just do that.
Maybe I don't have to do the big scary thing.
Yeah, maybe I don't have to finish writing that essay and like
Yep.
Yeah, and then, you know, also too, like there is a lot of work just in terms of like, oh, I have to gather all of the information about myself in terms of like like, you know, there's outside of like the courage of like, you know, sharing in these different ways, like essays and stuff like that. There's also like a lot of logistical things that you have to handle too. Like you have to have like an academic resume. And I'm like, what does that mean? I just have a regular one. Like, so it was a lot of, you know, a lot of like, you know, what we say in our practice, like human revolution, like really like polishing myself on the inside to grow more courage, more wisdom, but also like compassion for myself, that like I don't have to be controlled by like my previous circumstances. Like I feel like that's a big concept that I resonate with in the practice, is like the past doesn't have to necessarily control your future. Even if you do have whatever dark cloud it is lingering in your past, that you can still, transform and decide, that I want this outcome in the future.
And actually, like, I always think about, like, through what action I take today, not only does it, change my future, what will happen, it also in some way I feel like changes the past. Like, it doesn't change what actually happened, but it changes like my relationship to what has happened in the past. It changes meaning and significance. So something that kind of like the quote that you were sharing earlier, like all of these problems will become something that you look back on and with like pride, and you're glad that they happened. Like, what meaning do you think there has been, like, in your undergrad experience of, like, struggling with the academic probation, but then, getting study abroad and all of that?
Yeah, I definitely think that all those obstacles were like major stepping stones for me truly understanding like who it is that I am as a person, who it is like what I'm capable of. Like if you would have told me in high school, like, oh, when you're in college, you're gonna visit two countries and not really pay for it, I'd be like, you're crazy. Like, and it's like for example, I don't think my dad has ever been on a plane. Like, it's just not something that like anyone in my family does, or like anything that was relatable to me, like so foreign.
Yeah.
But all those experiences really helped me understand, the innate unlimited potential that I possess within my own life. We call it like Buddha nature. Like every, person has this like potential within their lives, but it can be really clouded by different things, and it's not always easy to see or understand that. But a lot of the time, when we look back on these obstacles, we can really see how that was actually a means for us to see that potential within ourselves, to really see our capacity as people, as human beings, what it is that we're made of. So I remember someone really asked me to, like, it was like a specific date, like what do you want to achieve by this specific date? And it was November 18th. And so I really was like scared at the time, but then I decided, okay, I'm going to be admitted to a graduate program by November 18th. And so, yeah, this person like wrote it down. They're like, okay, like I'm chanting with you. Like, so we would just continuously have dialogue about it. So yeah, I had like, applied to both of the programs. And then the one that I was really like, I had my heart set on the one that isn't ranked as high. Because I felt like, oh, it's not really possible to get into that higher ranked one. So I just really had my heart set, like, I'm going to go to that school. And then they rejected me really quickly. And I was like, what? I was just like, so many emotions. Yeah. Like, oh, this is probably a benefit. I'm a horrible person. I will never be able to achieve anything ever again. Like, just all the like extremes.
The back and forth between like, okay, I chanted about this a lot, so it must be a result of my chanting, versus like, oh my God, I'm the worst and I'm not gonna get into any school and my life is over.
Right. I'm like, if this school won't accept me, this other school definitely won't, because it's ranked higher. Like, what am I gonna do? So I just continuously redetermined, because especially when she submit the application, the only thing I can do now is chant. Like, I have no choice but to just chant. Because I gave them everything.
Were you chanting like, oh, this school I want to get into? Or like, how were you chanting about it?
Yeah, so when I was waiting to hear from the two, I was like definitely encouraged to chant to go to the school where I could fulfill my mission. But then there's also like a part of me that's just like, please accept me. Like, I just want to be accepted. I just want to be able to go somewhere, please. Like, the world's kind of on fire. I don't know what's happening, but I have this dream, so please take me. Chanting that way, like, I would just fulfill my mission, or like I will go to the place that is best for my life, really helps that like kind of anxious part of me like settle down. Because like your mind can just go through all types of different things of like, oh, but if I chance to go to this school, then I can have this. But if I chance and I go like, but it's like, okay, I just want to go wherever it is that I need to go.
So then as you're like chanting that way then about the last option, Like, how long did it take you to hear back?
Yeah, so I actually found out on November 14th. So I
Wow.
determined,
So 4 days
yeah,
before your deadline.
yes.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I remember like, straight away, like the person that was like training with me, like wrote down my goals, like the one that asked me to challenge towards November 18th, she like called me straight away, was like, Jackie, and I'm like crying and she's crying. And I was like, it happened, I did it. Oh my gosh. And it's, 4 days early. Like this is amazing.
Wow. Wow. And now you're almost finished, right? You have just
Mm-hmm.
a little bit left. Like, how has the program been? How are you feeling?
Yeah, so I'm in like one of the best programs in the country. It feels super wild to say that.
Yeah.
It's I've had like really, great professors, really great experiences. I had a really great like practicum. If you would have asked me like when I was like a sophomore in undergrad, I didn't think that any of this,
Mm.
would have been possible at all. It's really remarkable. I have so much, appreciation for how far I've come. And, in those times where I feel like I'm not really growing or advancing in my life, I just like remind myself of like, there was a time where all the situations that I'm in, I did not think were possible. I was
Mm.
able to, acquire like a full-time research position in an exercise lab for cancer survivors. Because, I had this prayer that I wanted to be able to do both, like something based in exercise and in public health. So I was able to
Mm.
find a job where I could like literally have those two things, meet in like a super, yeah, unique way.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's man, it's really crazy to hear myself say some of these things, but yeah, like it's been really amazing. I've learned so much. I feel like I've been able to really feel like just that much more of a capable, individual, like really and truly.
It's like, yeah, so you've been practicing 7 years, like bulk of your 20s, like I don't know, to have so much that like you've been able to like one that you've been able to accomplish, but two, like that none of those things would be possible had you not been able to like have the courage to really like, okay, I don't know if I totally believe that I can do it or that I'm capable, but I'm just gonna do it anyway. I'm sure like everybody listening has some kind of, or maybe many, like lofty kind of goals, but maybe doesn't quite feel like totally capable. What advice would you give them just from like a Buddhist perspective, like how to keep moving toward that goal and how to have the courage to go for it?
Yeah, the first thing I would tell them is you're born to win.
Mm-hmm.
You get to decide what winning really looks like. And you
Yeah.
get to, kind of go back to that concept, even like if you face like a rejection or like, I set this goal by this day and I didn't make it, you still get to decide what like winning in that moment really feels like. And then
Mm.
something else that I always return to is, this concept that within my life I have like this jeweled sword and that I could really like use it to fight, you know, and, traverse the terrains of the rainforest towards whatever it is that I need to go. Like, like
Mm-hmm.
I have this kind of like armor within myself. And then also too, like we're all the protagonists as well as the playwright of our lives, which when I first heard that, I was kind of like, I don't know about both. Protagonist, sure, but playwright, or like sometimes I'm
Mm.
like, sure, playwright, but am I the protagonist? Everything else is jolting me,
Yeah.
right? But it's like we get to really decide that our life is, a play in a stage, and we can continuously, and of course it's okay to like not feel like this all the time. Like I definitely don't feel like this all the time, but it's perfectly okay to continuously refresh your determination. Like if,
Mm.
you are like fighting towards a goal and then you stop, you could just redetermine again. You can
Yeah.
just sit down again and say, okay, what is it that I want to do? And you may change your mind, you may lose the desire. You like all of these things are like perfectly okay. It's perfectly okay to accept all the things that we have in front of us. Of course, easier said than done, but we ultimately, can really create causes that uh, push our life in a specific trajectory once we decide that that's what we want to do. And that's
Mm.
innate in every person. So I know it's easy to see like, oh, okay, like this person did that, but I could never do that. we as humans, we both share that same potential. Just a matter of being able to sit down and see it for ourselves. Yeah, I think just, but like regardless of whatever it was that I was facing or feeling, I always knew that I could lean on like my local Buddhist community for support.
Yeah.
So, even in those times where I just could not see any like possibility or like hope, or I was just so flooded with like negativity, negative emotions, whatever, I always knew that, even if I'm in a place where I like can't even chant right now, I always knew that I could reach out to someone for support. And yeah, in every step of the way, there was copious amounts of support, from my local Buddhist community. Like, I have so much appreciation for them, truly.